right, Judges 4, I think, is where we left off. Got our fun little cycle going here of our people doing evil, getting oppressed by other nations, crying out to God. God raises up a judge. Deborah is one of the judges. After Ehud died, the Israelites once again did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, a king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. And the commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. These are fun names. Harosheth Hagoyim, because he had 900 iron chariots and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, and they cried to the Lord for help. It's like, okay, what? Another vicious circle. Yep, that's part of the vicious circle. The 900 chariots is showing the military advantage. Normally, when you have that many chariots, you're gonna having an iron chariot is gonna usually work in your favor. Not this time, but yeah. It's a big army. So Deborah, a prophetess, the only judge who was also a prophet, by the way. Find that interesting that the only female judge is also the only prophet. So the wife of Lapidoth was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites came to her to have their disputes decided. She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam from Kadesh of Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead the way to Mount Tabor. I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." Okay, so you can't go without the woman? Very. Yep. Very well, Deborah said, "I will go with you, but because of the way you are going about this, the honor will not be yours. For the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." So put that in your pipe and smoke it. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh, where he summoned Zebulun and Naphtali. 10,000 men followed him, and Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched his tent by the great tree in Zananim near Kadesh. When they told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera gathered together his 900 iron chariots and all the men with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men at Barak's advance. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword, and Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim. All the troops of Sisera fell by the sword, and not a man was left. There you go. Yeah, except Sisera. And Sisera, however, fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there were friendly relations between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the clan of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." What? Oh, I bet it's fun and gruesome. So he entered her tent, and she put a covering over him. "I am thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted, and she drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. So there is where Deborah said that he would be handed over to a woman. Guess what? Just did. So Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead. Gotta love the Old Testament. It just... On that day, God subdued Jabin, the Canaanite king, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites grew stronger and stronger against Jabin, the Canaanite king, until he destroyed him. Okay, so how do you think all those chariots managed to be overcome?
Just thinking about the scope of how much space they all took in one little battlefield there.
Yep.
And all the horses and
Luckily, Deborah gives a song that interprets the event. And she tells us how they managed to defeat 900 chariots. If you go to chapter 5, verse 4. O Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched across the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, and the clouds poured down water. What happens if you have heavy iron chariots? They got mired in the mud. Yep. So send a good rainstorm. You know, it's like, they were going to be probably killed, but there you go. So that's the story of Deborah, one of the better judges. Yes.
considering women didn't really have that much of a rank
Mm-hmm.
or status in that society, how did she ever become a judge? I mean, she had to be somebody of great influence.
Yes. Yeah. Well, she was. However, it came about. Of course, the idea is that God raised them up. So, and being a prophet certainly helped. Get you to that point. But yeah, it is interesting because it's the only one that's mentioned that is female. So how she got there might have had something to do with who her husband was. They mentioned his name, but we have no idea who he was. But it's a stark contrast to all the people who say, well, women aren't supposed to do X, Y, or Z, and it's like, well, you have Deborah. It's for starters. And actually, Miriam also was a prophet and a leader of the people. She wasn't as high up as Moses, but I mean, in this case, you've got Deborah even probably at a higher stature than Miriam was, because she really isn't answering to the men. She's telling them what to do. Now, to be fair, they kind of turn things over to her. They basically aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and she's like, okay, fine, I'll do it then. She's like, you guys aren't going to do it? I'll do it. So, chapter 6, good old Gideon is the another one of our judges that gets raised up. Verse 11 of chapter 6, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. So he's not really, he's your average Joe. He's not, you kind of get the sense with Deborah that she kind of probably came from some kind of higher stature. Not Gideon. He's threshing wheat. And God comes along and says, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And he's like, huh? Yeah, God is with you, mighty warrior. I'm threshing wheat. But sir, the Lord is with us. Why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and put us into the hand of Midian. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. The Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together. So Gideon is a descendant of Joseph, because Manasseh was Joseph's son. No. That's a little further. Joseph in Egypt. Joseph in Egypt. Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me." I talked a little bit about this sign last time. "Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Let's see, verse 20. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. The angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the white meat and the bread. And the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Ah, sovereign Lord, I've seen the angel of the Lord face to face." And then, of course, don't be afraid, because anytime you see an angel. But apparently that one, cooking some food wasn't quite enough. Gideon wanted a little bit more. So verse 36, Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you said." And that is what happened. And Gideon rose early the next day. He squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. This time, make the fleece dry and ground covered with dew." That night God did so, only the fleece was dry and all the ground was covered with dew. Rats. Gideon's trying to kind of Moses-y. He's kind of Moses-y here. It's like, well, I really need a sign. Okay, how about another sign? How about another sign? I really don't want to do this. So guess what? He has to go do it. Now, of course, the story of Gideon is the fact that he got a whole bunch of guys together to go do this. And God said, "That's too many. You don't need that many." So, chapter 7. Early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. Well, I should say, everybody was here last week when I talked about why the dew was important, right? Yeah, that it was. You weren't. Oh, okay. Oh, no, I'll go over it because it's kind of important to understand at least why some of the, quote, miracles and things like that are the ones that they are. Because the God that was the supreme God of the Canaanites, really, the God of thunder and rain and fertility, was Baal. So basically what he's asking here is that was something Baal controlled, was dew. So who really controls it, Baal or God? So that's why it's like, that's a really bizarre request. Well, if you're trying to figure out who really is the Lord over those particular things, you ask for something like that. So that's why that particular miracle is what he asks for. Let's see. So chapter 7, verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." See, this is the thing about when God does things. He never wants the people, it's not they're the best army, they're the whatever. It's, I'm doing this because I'm God. And this isn't about you and your army and you doing things with your army that, I don't want you doing. So, announce now to the people, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. The Lord said to Gideon, "There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you there. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go." So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, "Separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink." 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. And the Lord said, "With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. So let all the other men go, each to his own place." So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Now the camp of Midian lay below them in the valley. During that night, the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp." So he and Purah and his servant went down to the outposts of the camp. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. That's how many there were, and he has 300 men. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. "I had a dream," he was saying. "A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped God. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Dividing the 300 men into their companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. Basically, this is make enough noise, you scare the bejesus out of them. This is psychological warfare. Kind of worked at Jericho. That was sort of the thing that they were doing at Jericho was psychological warfare. Gideon's going to do some psychological warfare too. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon." Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch. Just after they had changed the guard, they blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars, grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets that were to blow. And they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying as they fled. So, there you go. That was the end of that. So, there's more about Gideon, but you kind of get the idea. Then Gideon has some sons. Kind of has a messed up family. In verse 33, we find out here, "No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals." So there you go. There it goes again. And they also failed to show kindness to the family of Gideon for all the good things he had done for them. Abimelech was his son. Like I said, it's just kind of a messed up family. And we'll go. Then you get Jephthah in chapter 10. Jephthah is one that gets raised up that he makes an oath he shouldn't make.
Is this the guy with his daughter?
Yes. Yep, Jephthah's daughter. Chapter 11, kind of we get into Jephthah's story. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. So, there you go. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. "You're not going to get any inheritance in our family," they said, "because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him and followed him. He had a band of thugs. Beginning of gangs. It's just, when you're this child of a prostitute, you get kicked out of your family. Because I guarantee he was not the only child of a prostitute that was around. Let's see. Sometime later, when the Ammonites made war on Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob and said, "Come," they said, "be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites." So, Jephthah said to them, Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble? And the elders of Gilead said to him, Nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come fight with us. And you will be our head over all who lives in Gilead. So that was kind of the way in which he is able to kind of get back into a position of power from the standpoint of basically when you want to fight people, what do? You go find somebody you know is a pretty ruthless killer. So, verse 29. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he crossed Gilead and Manasseh, passed through Mizpah of Gilead, and from there he advanced against the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. This is not a good thing. If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a big burnt offering. Basically, this is how you try to pin God down. This is the deal thing. If you do something for me, I'll do something for you. So, that whole idea. That's why you have to be careful about deals you make with God. Because when you make a deal with God, it's not going to always turn out the way you think. And Jephthah is about to find that out. He fights the Ammonites. When verse 34, when Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of tambourines, and she was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. And when he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh, my daughter, you have made me miserable and wretched." Wait a minute. Exactly. God didn't ask for it. God didn't demand it. And he made this stupid oath. And now he's blaming the daughter for his stupid oath. Yeah. I agree, George. Yeah. It says, whatever becomes a whoever. So you have made me miserable and wretched because I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break. My father, she replied, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites. But grant me this one request. She said, give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends because I will never marry. You may go, he said, and he left her for 2 months. Now there are some who think that he didn't actually offer her up as a actual burnt offering. There are some who think that she just went into basically solitude of some sort. Scholarship kind of goes back and forth on this. I don't know. Sometimes I think probably just take it at face value. They probably killed her. Because, probably killed her. And then that last verse, from this comes the Israelite custom that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. All right. Nope, just Jephthah's daughter. Yep. And then you get Samson, chapter 13. Well, you have to like Ibzan of Bethlehem, who led Israel right before that, who had 30 sons and 30 daughters. He was busy. I doubt it's from the same woman. I'm sure he had several concubines. But still, 30 kids, that's impressive. Now, what you notice in the Bible, when the story is going to be about a woman, it will say, like in chapter 13, verse 2, it'll say, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was sterile and remained childless. We're going to find this in also Hannah, who is the mother of Samuel. It always starts out, there was a certain man, but it's actually going to be about the woman. Yeah, so whenever you hear a certain man, and Ruth starts out that way as well. There's a certain man who went to, so it's kind of how you know that's your key, your clue. Oh, this is going to be actually about the woman. Yeah. But she's childless, common problem. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are sterile and childless, but you're going to conceive and have a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean, because you will conceive and give birth to a son. No razor may be used on his head, because the boy is to be a Nazarite set apart from God from birth, and he will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines." So here comes Samson. Samson gets into trouble because of his love life. He is. When he becomes a Nazarite, and when you become a Nazarite, that meant you can't cut your hair, you can't touch anything that is dead, and you can't drink any wine. Guess what Samson's going to do? All three. Samson makes a terrible Nazarite. So
does that mean they can't eat any meat? Unclean meat?
Yeah, they can't eat it if it's been properly prepared, but they can't actually go touch like a dead animal and prepare it. Someone else would have to prepare it. Yeah. So verse 24 of chapter 13, the woman gave birth to a boy, named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Manadan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." Okay. His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." His parents did not know that he was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. I always like the little commentary the author puts in. So Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother, and they approached the vineyards of Timnah. Suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, so that he tore the lion open with his bare hands, as he might have torn a younger goat. But he told neither his father nor mother what he had done, because remember, he's not supposed to touch anything dead. But he killed a lion. So then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. So there you go. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. In it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hand and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for bridegrooms. When he appeared, he was given 30 companions. "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." So, "Tell us your riddle," they said. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet." So he's, making a riddle about his own little adventure that no one clearly is going to have any clue what it means. So for 3 days they could not give the answer, but on the 4th day they said to Samson's wife, because those wedding feasts last like a week. So said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us?" "Well, then don't agree to a riddle." And Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." "I haven't explained it to my father or mother," he replied, "so why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day he finally told her, because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to her people. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men in the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" And Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle."
What did that mean? He messed around with his wife?
It messed around with his wife, yeah. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. So this is how he fulfills his end of the bargain. I'm going to go kill some of these people and give them your clothes, and there you go. Is that the first? Yeah. Jeopardy question. Yeah, well, he didn't give his wife away. He left. Burning with anger, he went up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was then given to the friend who attended him at his wedding. Except Samson didn't really decided maybe he ought to go back and make nicey nice with his wife. So later on, at the time of the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, I'm going to go to my wife's room, but her father would not let him in because guess what? She's married to someone else now. I was so sure you thoroughly hated her that I gave her to your friend. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Here. take the sister. Take her instead. I love how they do that. Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked who did this, they were told Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his friend. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. Do you start to see how this is starting to really kind of, when we started this evening about, half an hour ago, talking about Deborah and, all this stuff, and now we're talking about these petty little stories of Samson just being stupid. And and wanting vengeance, and when he gets vengeance, it leads to more, and there's that. And he's the judge, isn't he? Yeah, he's the judge. Yep. And he kind of continues this until he finally, they just kind of keep doing this back and forth, this vengeance thing, until he meets Delilah, because he's just got a thing for Philistine women. I mean, he just can't keep his hands off the Philistine women. I don't know what it is. Yep. So, chapter 16, verse 4. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength. So she basically turns into a spy. Great strength of his, and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied and subdued. And Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh thongs, have not been dried, I become weak as any other man. So the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh thongs that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. When the men hidden in the room, she called him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the thongs as easily a piece of string snaps. So you would think that after the first betrayal, you would not ever really finally give her the real thing, because this happens over and over. She keeps asking, he keeps telling her the wrong thing, she keeps doing it, and finally, in verse 15, then she said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? Well, because you keep telling people. This is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. I mean, why would you do this? Such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death. So he told her everything. He is an idiot. I mean, just, Samson's an idiot. Yeah, he is an idiot. No razor has ever been used on my head, because I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. Yep. Delilah saw that he had told her everything. She sent word to the rulers of the Philistines. Shocking. This is so surprising. Come back once more. He has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands, having put him to sleep on her lap. She called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. So they wind up gouging out his eyes, take him down to Gaza, bind him with bronze shackles. They set him up, grinding in the prison. He's doing the work the donkeys do. That's the kind of labor they're having him do. Basically, this is what the animals do. Yeah. But his hair starts to grow back. So in this kind of final act, once his strength returns, they bring him out and they want to, they ridicule him again. This is when he pulls down the columns in his final act of revenge. And yeah. But you kind of start seeing where everything is going. When you get to chapter 19, this, in my view, is the worst story in the entire Bible.
Is this where they cut her up in pieces?
Yes. Yes. This is what we devolve to in chapter 19. There's a Levite who has a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, and she was unfaithful to him, so she left him, went back to her father's house in Bethlehem, and after she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys, and she took him into her father's house, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, prevailed upon him to stay. So he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day they got up early, and he prepared to leave. The girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drank together, and afterward the girl's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him. So he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the girl's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. When the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. You don't travel at night. It's a bad idea. It's when all the robbers and everything else come out. Just a bad idea. So when they were near Jerusalem and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into an alien city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." He added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them into his home for the night. That was kind of how you were, hospitality was you sat in the city gate and you waited. If you were a stranger, there were really no inns or things like that. You didn't just go to the Super 8 motel or the Hotel 6, the Motel 6 or something that just didn't exist. You waited for somebody to invite you into their home. Yeah, so this kind of tells you what this place is like, the fact that they waited so long for somebody to invite them in because they were not big into hospitality. But verse 16, that evening an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the men of the place were Benjamites, came from his work in the fields. And when he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, he said, "Where are you going and where did you come from?" So we are on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I am going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me into his house. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, your maidservant, and the young man with us. We don't need anything. You are welcome at my house, the old man said. Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square. So he took them into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. And while they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man, who own the house, bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him. What does this remind you of? What story? Sodom and Gomorrah. Yep. Only no angels to intervene this time. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this disgraceful thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But to this man don't do such a disgraceful thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. Daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Think about it, consider it, tell us what to do." So in chapter 20, all the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came out as one man and assembled before the Lord in Mizpah. And the leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their places in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 soldiers armed with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah, and then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gibeah, Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they committed this lewd and disgraceful act in Israel. Now all you Israelites, speak up and give your verdict. Yeah. Verse 12. The tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What about this awful crime that was committed among you? Now surrender those wicked men of Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites, so they won't give up the guys who did it. Now, interestingly, they go to God saying, "Should we do this?" In verse 23, the Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening, and they inquired of the Lord. They said, "Shall we go up again to battle against the Benjamites, our brothers?" And the Lord answered, "Yeah, go up against them." What does he not do? What does he not promise them? Won't be with them, and they won't be victorious. He doesn't say anything. He just says, "Go fight them, go fight them. I don't care." The Israelites drew near to Benjamin on the second day, and this time when the Benjamites came out from Gibeon to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. So then the Israelites, all the people, went up to Bethel. They go back to God, and they're like, "What happened?" And then the Lord responded, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." We get to verse 35. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. And when the Benjamites saw, that they were beaten. Basically, they've essentially wiped out most of Israel. If you get to chapter 21, verse 3, "O Lord, the God of Israel, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today?" I don't know. Maybe because you just wiped them out. Judges is a frustrating book. It is a frustrating book. It is. Yeah. That's what I mean. It starts out kind of on this good note. It starts out on this note of they're fighting other nations. They're still kind of, left over from Joshua kind of thing. They're still doing their establishing themselves in the land. But then they kind of keep doing this cycle, and the cycle just keeps kind of getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
Do you think that this is one of many stories that's happening throughout this land at this time?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is not just one story.
No.
I mean, that's why God got kind of mad with everybody. He said, hey, there are a bunch of corrupt people all over.
Oh, yeah. Everybody was doing what was right in their own sight, is what Judges says. And this is what they devolved to. And
But they're heathens.
yeah. Like the ending verse of Judges is chapter 17, or sorry, not chapter 17, chapter 21, verse 25. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as he saw fit. And that's the ending of Judges.
But they weren't really faithful in
Yeah,
going to
it's
the Lord.
it's this final kind of scathing indictment of this culture of violence that really got going with Samson. I mean, it started before that, but you see the big turn with Samson where it becomes not about freeing the people anymore. It becomes about Samson and his own desire for vengeance, to this story, which is totally about vengeance and just corruption and everything else, and nothing good's going to come out of it. And just that culture of violence that is starting to emerge, and that violence is now turned inward instead of outward. They're fighting amongst themselves now instead of fighting elsewhere. And that triumphant picture of conquest is gone, and it's this brutality that is just destroying their own society. So what we get then is the book of Ruth. That kind of comes in, very small book, but gives us a little different way of looking, for one thing, at foreigners. Because she comes into the time of Judges. It says that right off the bat, chapter 1, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah, the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons and her husband. When she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, Naomi and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud, and she said, and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "No, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and could give birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." So at this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So a little bit of persistence. So they go on to Bethlehem. This like I said, we just kind of had this nasty judges thing, but now we're going to get this kind of this story of hope. You know, it kind of gives you a different feel for things that are going on. It's a time of the barley harvest when they get there. Harvesting was done by hand. The reapers were supposed to leave grain in the field for the poor. So that's what Ruth winds up doing when they get there. Is she's out. She's gleaning off the stuff so that they can eat, because that was part of the law, was that you left a portion of your field for the poor people to come in and eat it. There's a man, though, named Boaz, who is from the clan of Elimelech, so he's what they call a kinsman redeemer. And he kind of takes notice of Ruth. She's a really hard worker, you know, and probably isn't too bad to look at. But he's impressed with her. So he orders that they leave some extra. And then, of course, when Naomi discovers this, she sees the promise in all of this, and tells her to kind of wash up and go find out where he's spending the night. I love the story of Ruth and Boaz. Chapter 3. Verse 3, wash and perfume yourself, put on your best clothes, go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, so drunken Boaz went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now, there's a lot of speculation. Yes, it's a euphemism. Yeah, the feet sometimes in Hebrew is a euphemism for the genitals. Now, we don't know that for certain, but that sometimes. But in the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. The Lord bless you. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask." So interestingly enough, he kind of wakes up, and whatever happens, Boaz decides they need to get married. So we don't get told what exactly happens on the threshing floor. But Boaz decides they need to get married, is essentially what goes on.
What is a threshing floor?
The threshing floor, when they beat the grain and stuff to separate out the chaff, because he was drunk. You know. But it's also sometimes where the men would go there and kind of hang out and get drunk and rowdy and whatever, and the women don't want them home, so they tended to it was their version of the bar, basically. They'd go, they'd do that, then So the threshing floor was always kind of an interesting, again, that's also one of those places as well, that it's like, something probably happened. But, like I said, we're not told what happened. We just know that she laid there with him till morning, got up before anyone could be recognized, and said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." She wasn't supposed to be there. So said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then he went back to town. Ruth came to her mother-in-law, and Naomi asked, "How'd it go?" She told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.' Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." So Naomi seemed to know something was up, too. So there you go. Basically, he goes down to the city gate where all the public business is done. He works out the arrangements. They get married. So you kind of have this movement from all this loss that you had in Judges all this loss that Naomi had, all this loss that Ruth had, because she lost her husband too. To this, it's the story of hope, some kind of a new beginning.
It's like a story on Hallmark.
Yeah,
You always find your guy.
yeah, and it goes from loss to new relationship. And then, of course, we're going to learn that they have some children. And the children that they have is their great-grandson is going to be King David, who is, of course, going to be the one to define really the national identity of the Israelites. And also Ruth, of course, then is then named in the genealogy of Jesus. And mhm. And the interesting thing is, though, where was Ruth from? Moab. She was a Moabite. The Moabites were the descendants of Lot and his incestuous relationship with his daughters. Moabites were not liked. They were despised. So you have this foreigner that nobody likes, yet coming in, and then she is going to be the great grandmother of King David. So again, it's that story of they're fighting foreigners, and yet then here comes this foreigner. So again, there's that tension that you get of the relationship with the foreigner, of both fighting them and yet welcoming them in and making them an integral part of the continuing story. So Joshua, kind of to recap, Joshua was the faithful leader. Judges is a cycle where they're too much like other nations, become their own worst enemies. Ruth is the foreigner who welcomes the migrant, and in turn the foreigner finds a place in Israel. Because remember, the Moabites welcomed Naomi in first, and then they go back, and then so it's that back and forth. Poses some challenges to us. Those questions of where we find ourselves. Do we see ourselves as the faithful victors that are, entitled to a certain status that we enjoy? What extent do we contribute to cycles of violence and dysfunction that damages our own well-being? Because if you look at, it's a commentary on what we do as humans. It's not just the Israelites that do this. This is a commentary on, so. Where do we see ourselves in this story? It's like, how much are we sometimes like the judges, where we get things turned inward, and we contribute to those cycles of violence and dysfunction. When are we the outsiders? When are we the ones looking for help, looking for someone to open their door? How do we then empathize with others who are outsiders? So it raises a lot of those questions when you look at these three books as a whole. Just, where do you see yourself? And how do you see, the conquering nation that devolves into chaos and destruction, and yet this story of hope of this foreigner that comes in, and they're going to get this king, and it's going to kind of give renewed energy to Israel. So those are kind of some of those fun stories to contemplate. So that's it for tonight. And we'll... Yep. Yep. You're welcome.